Since 1995, over 26,000 international students from all walks of life join the British investigators' training courses in anomalous phenomena, the only courses of their kind. Constructed by the world's leading academics and brilliant minds within ufology, paranormal and supernatural, parapsychological study, anomalous phenomena, science, hypnotherapy, spiritualism, astrology, astronomy, cryptozoology and many other areas, our certified self-study courses will teach you how to assess, analyze, engage, formulate, document and be cognizant of all types of phenomena, suitable for light workers and starseeds, curious personalities and inquisitive minds, skeptics alike and truth seekers. For more information, please visit www.stellaruniversity.com.
Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. There have been reports of spontaneous human combustion for decades. It is a phenomenon that the medical world cannot explain, and one that leaves the rest of us bewildered and more than a little scared. It's an event that takes place without warning, where people suddenly burst into flames and die. If it weren't for the photographic evidence of so many cases, it would be easily dismissed as a figment of the imagination. The most recent example is this amazing story from Alison Holloway in London.
It was the orange-coloured heat that enveloped him first. A sticky, choking humidity that wrapped around the policeman and everything else in the room where Henry Thomas had died. Outside, in the rolling hills near the village of Ebervale, the Wales countryside was chilled by winter in January. But in here, the hot air clawed at his lungs.
I opened the door and stepped in, and it was as if I stepped into Dante's Inferno. That's what struck me immediately I entered the room. There was this hellish sort of orangey red glow, and the room was literally steaming. It was humid, the heat was radiating from the walls, and it was very dark apart from this reddish glow.
The policeman was John Hamer, a special crime scene officer with the Gwent Constabulary, and he'd been called to the house of a local resident, Henry Thomas, after a report of a house on fire.
I'd been a policeman for 24 years, and for the last few years I was a scenes of crime officer, which meant that I attended every serious crime, death, suicide, whatever, and I photographed the scene, looked for fingerprints and forensic evidence, which was then passed on to the forensic scientists to examine. So I'd seen quite a lot of horrible deaths, you know, pilots burned to death in light aircraft crashes and bodies been in rivers for months, whatever. And you get used to this thing, and I was pretty hardened.
But nothing had prepared Hamer for what he saw in this room. 73-year-old Henry Thomas had turned to ashes, burned to a crisp from the inside out, like 200 other recorded cases. It's called spontaneous human combustion, in police lingo, human candles. Charles Dickens, in his book Bleak House, had described the exact scene John Hamer witnessed this day. There is a suffocating vapour in the room. The burning smell is there, and the soot is there, and he is not there. Reports of spontaneous human combustion date back to the 1600s, and its eerie descriptions allow for none of the usual police or scientific explanations. As in the case of Henry Thomas, the coroner's reports usually find that the victim died by accidental fire, like smoking in bed or falling into a fireplace. But the dozens of photos of death scenes seem to tell another story. In all cases, the bodies seem to burn up from within, leaving only parts of the limb extremities intact. Despite the intense heat needed to consume human bone and flesh, There is little about the body that is burned, even flammable clothing and carpet. In the case of Henry Thomas, police officer John Hamer came upon a scene that felt like the fires of hell had swept through the room, but burned only its human contents.
There was a television set just inside the door, still on, the valves were glowing, although no picture on the screen, and the plastic knobs had melted out of shape. It looked like something painted by Salvador Dali. Then looking to the right, I saw a pile of ashes, and protruding from the end of the ashes was a pair of human feet clothed in socks and with just a lower few inches of trouser legs attached to them. I just couldn't believe it. It took me a few minutes to realise what I was actually looking at. What I was looking at was impossible as far as I was concerned, but I had to accept the facts as I saw them. And I was looking at a pile of ashes on the living room carpet in a small, enclosed council house. And those ashes were the remains of a man. All that was left apart from that was the unburnt feet and the blackened skull.
Since Thomas's death and the publicity that followed, Officer Hamer has tracked down, or been told about, at least 5 other human candles in Britain.
All of those 5 cases, 4 of them, the verdict was death by burning, and one of them, a tramp in London who was discovered face down on the first floor landing of a derelict building. The fireman broke in and found him with blue flames issuing at force from his abdomen. He was burning the landing, not the other way around.
Jenny Randles, who co-authored the book Spontaneous Human Combustion, among other paranormal subjects, says the scientific world has been stumped by the evidence of such cases.
All the time we're trying to find a rational explanation for what is going on. And that is the great challenge of spontaneous human combustion. Clearly there's something happening, because the cases, the evidence, the photographs of these people in these conditions prove that beyond any reasonable doubt. It's an extraordinary thing, because the human body, of course, is basically 2/3 water and very solid skeletal bone structure, which is effectively indestructible. We've talked to people in crematoriums who specialise, of course, in destroying a human body by fire, and they cannot make bones turn into ash, which is what happens in spontaneous combustion. That's the most extraordinary part of it. And that seems to be beyond the capabilities of even our best machines that generate intense heat.
Randles, who wrote the book with colleague Peter Huff, said she became involved after they were brought in to investigate the strange death of a college student.
Nothing, they didn't mind at all. In fact, he bought me this ring. He bought me this ring. That's gorgeous.
A teenage girl was walking down the stairs at college, happily chatting to her friends in the middle of the morning, when, out of nowhere, she burst into flames.
Oh, my God. What's going on?
Testimony from some of the witnesses talked about a strange spark suddenly appearing in midair and falling towards the girl, who then burst into flames. They managed to put the flames out. She was taken to hospital, but tragically she died from her injuries.
But Randles says the strangest case of human combustion she ever investigated was the burning of Mary Reeser. Suddenly, sitting in her favourite armchair with 2 fans blowing, she apparently burst into flames. That story in a moment. Of all the cases of spontaneous human combustion investigated by Jenny Randles, co-author of the book Spontaneous Human Combustion, none was quite so mystifying as the death of a woman named Mary Reeser. Mary was a socialite and perhaps the most important woman in the town of Columbia, Pennsylvania. But after her husband's death, she moved to Florida.
Well, Mom, welcome to Florida.
Oh,
Great to have you home, I tell you.
Great here.
Yeah.
We're going to have so much fun. This is wonderful.
I tell you.
I
It's
miss
been
you.
too long.
It was in her Florida apartment late on the night of July the 2nd, 1951, as she sat alone, depressed and homesick for Columbia, that she literally went up in smoke. Her son, Dr. Richard Reeser, now 84, remembers visiting her only hours before her death.
The night before, the last I saw her, I drove down to say goodnight to her. We were about 9 o'clock, and my youngest daughter was with me, Marty, who was about 4 years old then. And she was sitting in her overstuffed chair. The bedclothes had been turned down, bed sheet, and the fan was blowing. He had a fan. And she seemed perfectly at ease.
After Dr. Reeser left his mother that night, something happened in Mary Reeser's little apartment at 1200 Cherry Street in St. Petersburg, Florida. Nobody will ever know exactly why it happened, but when firefighters broke through the door the next morning, Mary at first seemed to be missing. The air in the room was a thick, grey haze. The carpet beneath their feet had a sinister and somewhat nauseating stickiness. The ceiling and one of the walls were black with soot, but had not been burned. A body-sized patch of carpeting had been scorched down to the cement floor. And in the centre of the exposed cement, a modest pile of black ashes. The last remains of Mary Reeser. Clues to Mary's death were scant, but a neighbour reported waking up and smelling smoke at about 5 a.m. When she retrieved her morning paper at 9 o'clock, the smell had gone. It was about 8 a.m. that a Western Union delivery boy came with a telegram from friends back in Colombia saying they had found her a long-awaited apartment back in her hometown.
She had wanted to return to Colombia for the summer and stay with friends and renew old acquaintances. And it's strange, very strange, that this whole episode was found by a telegram boy knocking on the door, or the morning she was found, with a telegram stating that from her friend in Colombia that she was to come up there. Very strange.
The delivery boy said when he tried the doorknob of Mary's apartment, it was too hot to touch, an indication of some intense heat being generated from inside. The investigation found that Mary had perished sometime between dawn and 9 a.m. The media of the day went crazy with the story, and though the official cause of death was accidental burning, possibly from a cigarette, there are many who are convinced the spark that consumed Mary Reeser came from something within.